March monthly forecast here at the 1 Degree Outside Weather Network. Hi, meteorologist Matt Noyes. Before we dive into the weather pattern for the upcoming month, just a reminder that you can get more exclusive content or support the mission by becoming a member at membership.onedegreeoutside.com. Oftentimes for this monthly forecast, we start with a height to 500 millibars. Basically, how high up do you have to go before the barometer reaches a 500 millibar reading? Why is that important? It represents average temperature. If you don't have to go very high up, that's very dense air. Cold air is dense. So the cool colors are the more dense air, lower heights, and colder average atmospheric temperature. Farther south you go, higher heights, warmer colors, warmer average atmospheric temperature. You know, overall, the theme of the month is definitely clash, but that's what you would expect in March, right? We set things up where the cold does not want to leave Canada. The warmth continues to build with a strengthening sun angle. The farther south you go toward the equator, and you get this squeeze play that's on. And in those squeeze plays, the question always becomes, where and when can you develop perhaps meaningful storm centers? Well, at first, we've got disturbances that are kind of rippling through the flow. We generally have warmer temperatures through a large column of the atmosphere, meaning we're going to have a propensity for warmth in the first half of the month. But that's definitely not the whole story, because notice what happens as we get out toward about March 6th, 7th. You start to get energy digging down to the four corners. This ends up closing off as an upper level low. The reason that's important is it's going to have Pacific moisture, and as it starts to get picked up by the jet stream again, it will grab Gulf moisture. So now you've got a moisture-loaded system that's going to be shooting across the country, headed for the northeast, and arriving sometime along about the 12th of the 12th into the 13th, right there. The other reason that that's important is because the cold air is not gone. Look what's going on up in Canada as we get out toward the 12th. You've got the polar vortex really well established. Cold is not weakening. There's plenty of snowpack in Canada. So in other words, as you bring up these moist disturbances with warmth, you're colliding with the cold that doesn't want to let go. Now, what does that actually mean in terms of rain or snow line and things like that? Of course, you know, that's what we'll have to work out in our insights video as we get closer to it. But I can tell you that when I look at this, I say, I wouldn't write off a big whopper of a heavy, wet snowstorm off the table in a pattern like this, because you've got the cold so close by. The other interesting thing is that as we get into the middle and second half of the month, the polar vortex, there are no signals it's going to completely break down. Quite the opposite for us. What is still some cold across the globe on the other side of the northern hemisphere around Siberia, look at this, begins to break down and consolidate to our side of the northern hemisphere. We start to dig a trough or a dip in the jet stream again. Colder than average temperature tries to dig in through a deep layer of the atmosphere. So actually, interestingly, relative to normal, we may be warmer than normal in the first half of the month, and then near or perhaps even cooler than normal in the second half of the month. Of course, normal is going up every day, the deeper into the month that you go, right? The other impact here is on the jet stream, the fast river of air high in the sky that steers our storm systems, kind of separates the cold to the north from warm to the south. Do you see in that same time frame, somewhere around the 12th to 13th, you've got a right entrance to the jet stream going on here. See that jet streak? Very, very fast river of air. And right in here would favor storm development and strengthening. Well, remember, that's the disturbance coming out of the four corners. So this would argue, but you don't want to get bogged down in the fine details. This would argue for maybe the storm developing right over southern New England, snow north, rain south. But the point here isn't to get those fine details right in the monthly forecast. The point is to show that we have a favorable setup for juicy, moisture-laden storms that can strengthen handily as they move through. And you have the potential for a couple of biggies over the course of March if they come together. The question would be rain versus snow. But this is not a pattern where I would say you have no chance of getting heavy, wet snow out of it. You've got that cold air we looked at close by. And there's that trough trying to dig out again as we get toward, let's say, that second half of the month. Interesting, looking back over the last 30 days, we had told you that for February, like January, it would be less than normal precipitation, but more than normal snow. Well, indeed, everywhere in yellow ended up with less than normal precipitation. That included here at home, but we did go above normal on snowfall across the area. Well, now as we look out to the upcoming month and say, what are we going to get for precipitation? Here's the big thing to understand. This is a wet month in New England normally, meaning a lot of precipitation normally comes down. So yes, if we get the disturbances I was showing you, that absolutely is going to paint a picture of above normal precipitation for a large part of the eastern half of the country. But probably not here at home. It will be close, but with normal precipitation of 4.17 inches in some place like Boston, very hard, I think, to go above normal. Maybe close, but we'll call it near normal anyway. And in terms of snow, look, that one could go with what we just looked at together, could go either way. If I had to make a bet on it, I'd say probably close to normal, only because it's the safe bet between whether or not you bring in that warmth or the cold dominates. But it would take one storm in a pattern like this to go way above normal on that snow, and I wouldn't rule that out. In terms of the overall temperature regime, everybody, for the most part, in the eastern two-thirds of the country is above normal. There's the colder air that digs down across the Pacific Northwest and the northwest quarter of the country. But wait a minute, not necessarily here at home. Again, if you only looked at the first half of March, I would tell you it's warmer than normal. But that's not what we're looking at, right? With that amount of cold that's still in place and the polar vortex actually strengthening on our side of the hemisphere in the second half of the month, that actually turns up the chances to get some cooler shots of air to come in the second half of the month. So we'll call this a near normal temperature forecast for right here in New England, even if upstate New York ends up warmer than normal. We'll see how it turns out. Again, I'm the first to say, in full transparency and disclosure, that monthly forecasts, we tend to do pretty well with them, but they're not always going to be right on the money. So we'll see how it turns out. You can follow it every day out of the next 14 days at a time using our free 5-star 1 degree outside weather app on the App Store and Google Play. And of course, don't forget, every day we've got the early morning videos to get you started out and insights frequently to look out to the next several days.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this 1 Degree Outside video.
Get exclusive content, support the mission at membership.onedegreeoutside.com. And don't forget, free and 5 stars on the App Store and Google Play. Search the number 1 Degree Outside weather.